Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again, here with the second episode of the Tucker Carlson 9/11 files, the cover-up commission. That's what this episode is about, so if you're here for this, let's jump on in.
In January 2000, as the CIA was tracking two future hijackers as they journeyed to Los Angeles, George W. Bush was 7 months into his presidential campaign.
What we're going to do is we're going to do something no other presidential candidate has been able to do. The near impossible. Remember what it was? The near impossible turn like that? One of the most exhilarating moments of my political career, and yours too.
His campaign was working to take down his opponent at the time, Arizona Senator John McCain, by spreading rumors he'd fathered a black bastard child with a prostitute.
You should be ashamed. Yeah, you should be ashamed.
The following December, two other hijackers, Muhammad Atta, the ringleader of the plot, and Marwan al-Shehi.
Hang on. I knew nothing about that was part of George W. Bush's campaign to say what he said about, was his name McCain? In the run-up, that he fathered a black bastard child. It's ridiculous that I don't vote. It doesn't make me any better than anybody else, but I haven't voted in well over 2 decades. And I don't say that because I'm proud of it. It's just a matter of fact. It's just something I don't do. I don't vote. But the fact that we, regardless of which country we are in, vote for these people is just ridiculous to me. I don't get it. I don't understand it. There's all this talk around if you don't vote, then you're not having your say and you can't influence and affect any change. Far out, man. Anyway, I don't have the answers for that. It's annoying and frustrating and disappointing that people would vote for somebody that's going around saying things like that. Even if it was true, unless McCain has committed adultery against his wife, which is poor, we shouldn't be voting for them. Or I don't know if that's not the reason. Like there's all sorts of that comparison between Hitler and Winston Churchill and those things when you look at that clean cut versus somebody that was a bit maybe not too appetizing, I suppose, for want of a better term, in terms of Winston Churchill, but the type of leader that he was versus somebody that was clean cut, supposedly, in Hitler, and looking at the devastation that he caused. So I definitely don't pretend to have the answers, but man, voting for people, it's nuts to me that stuff happens and that then they go and win the votes or they're rigged or whatever. Anyway,
We're finishing their pilot training in Venice, Florida, on the West Coast. In Washington, the Supreme Court ruled that George W. Bush had won the 2000 election. John McCain wanted to get political revenge. When he got his chance 10 months later, it would have historic consequences. The official story of what happened on 9/11 comes from a single report, the 9/11 final report of the National Commission. In the 2 decades since it was released, it has become the basis for all media coverage of terror attacks that day. What the media never mentioned is that the commission itself was a farce. It was intentionally underfunded. It was poorly structured. It was, from top to bottom, corrupt. 2 years after the report was released, the commission's own chairman admitted it was set up to fail.
Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
Beginning in the first hours after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, the Bush administration began leveraging the tragedy to launch their next project, a so-called global war on terror.
The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda.
In a normal country, its leaders would insist on an answer to the simple question: how did a terror network closely monitored by the United States intelligence agencies, including a unit dedicated to following them at CIA headquarters in Langley, how did a group like that manage to pull off the 9/11 attacks in broad daylight? That's the question. But this is not a normal country, and it was never answered. In fact, the Bush administration ferociously opposed any attempt to look carefully at what happened that day. And that presents a bigger question. Why? What did they have to hide?
My name is Kristen Breitweiser. My husband Ron was killed on September 11th.
Breitweiser is one of 4 9/11 widows who became famous at the time as the, quote, Jersey Girls. They were some of the only people in public life in the United States who wouldn't let it go. They didn't believe the official 9/11 story, and they often said so. They were all over the media for several years, determined to identify government officials who may have been complicit in the tragedy. In the end, they were ignored.
We were looking at a Bush administration that really was not interested in looking backwards. There was a push to immediately go to war. There was an invasion into Afghanistan, and then there was the queue up for the war in Iraq.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Silver tongue, eh? Easy to leverage the that whole situation and the narrative. Easy to be the author of the narrative being shared out. Like I said, I believed it hook, line, and sinker. What little I heard and knew, and I never did any research. I'm still not doing any research now. This is my research as far as research goes, and for me, listening to and hearing these. But there's some pretty compelling stuff in here that speaks to me. Even before I got to even reacting to the first part with stuff that I was hearing, but again, never really delved into because I've never seen anything presented in the way in which Tucker Carlson has done here. So shout out to him and what he's put together and all those behind the scenes. That's because I'd never seen anything like this that seems to have, again, more questions than answers.
Rather than get to the bottom of what actually happened, the Bush administration immediately exploited the crisis to push for what it really wanted, which was an invasion of Iraq. In his book, Against All Enemies, George W. Bush's counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke said that when he went back to the White House immediately after 9/11, he, quote, expected to go back to a round of meetings examining what the next attacks would be, what our vulnerabilities were. Instead, he realized with what he called almost sharp physical pain that Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz were going to take advantage of the tragedy to promote their agenda about Iraq. And that's exactly what they did. On the afternoon of September 11th, Rumsfeld said his instinct was to hit Saddam Hussein at the same time, not only bin Laden. The day after the attack, Bush asked Clarke to see if Saddam did this, see if he's involved in any way.
It's interesting to hear the guy, as he's reading through, I forget the name of the person that he mentioned, was expecting to go back to the office and hear and sit down and discuss what are some of our other potential vulnerabilities after the Twin Towers have just been taken out. You know, what other landmarks might they look to try to destroy, or have they targeted, or have they started preparations and planning for, you know, the White House or other significant landmarks that might be targets, the Pentagon, who knows? But hearing him say that that's not what happened, instead they started going straight into it. Just in my head, it's hindsight, benefit of hindsight, and looking at this through a different lens than what I had as a soldier. It throws up all sorts of questions and more conspiracy theories and doubts in my mind as to why the global war on terror happened, and how they were so successful. It just doesn't make sense. Lots of questions, man. It almost seems like Rumsfeld, to the guy that was talking, or to the guy that was talking about what he expected to go into that meeting for, almost seems like he tipped his hand. You know, let's use this. Forget about any other vulnerabilities that we might have in American soil. Let's leverage this to get into Iraq as well. Hook, line, and sinker, man. That was me.
And while meeting with the president on September 15th at Camp David, Wolfowitz argued that Iraq was ultimately the source of the terrorist problem and should therefore be attacked.
We learned quite quickly that we were not going to get the answers that we really wanted with regard to the murder, the homicide of our 3,000 loved ones. My husband, Ron, was 39 when he was killed. He was a really good man. He was smart and a good dad. And he had called me on the morning of September 11th I was rushing out the door to take my daughter to speech therapy, and I had no idea what was going on. I didn't have the television on, and he was like, "Sweets, it's me. I'm okay." And I had no idea. I'm like, "What? Okay, I'm glad you're okay." And he was like, "No." He's like, "Put the television on," and he's like, "It's not my building. I knew you would be worried. It's not my building." And I put the television on, and I was still on the phone with him, and I was like, "Oh my God, like what is that?" And he was like, "There's an explosion in the building next to me, but it's not my building. I'm safe. I'm fine." And I was like, "It's really bad. It looks bad." And he was like, "That's why I called. Don't worry. It's not my building." And he's like, and then his voice cracked and he was like, "Sweets." He's like, "People are falling out the windows." I'm like, "Just, what are you going to do?" And he's like, "Well, I'm going to go down to the trading floor and see if I can find a television to see what's going on. We don't know anything." He's like, "But I didn't want you to worry. I love you." He's like, "I'll call you back." And, that was the last I spoke to him. And, like 3 minutes after we got off the phone, I still had the TV on, and I saw his building explode right where he was. And I wish I told him to run. I wish I told him to get out. I wish I told him, "It's not safe. Something's wrong. Get out." But I didn't. I think, feeling that way, feeling like, why didn't I know? Why didn't I have a woman's instinct to be like, get out, made me want to fight for the commission and for everything else, because I felt like the American public deserves to know.
The Bush administration, which at the time was enjoying a historic 90% approval rating, was pushing a very clear storyline. They told the country that Osama bin Laden had simply caught American authorities off guard.
There was no silver bullet that could have prevented the 9/11 attacks.
That was a lie. And by May of 2002, more than 2/3 of Americans understood that it was a lie. They wanted an investigation into the so-called intelligence failures that led to the attack. The initial effort to investigate 9/11 was a joint congressional commission led by Senator Bob Graham, a Democrat of Florida, and Congressman Porter Goss, a former CIA officer who would later become the agency's director, appointed by Bush.
These public hearings are part of our search for truth.
Cheney did not want anyone looking into his failures that day, the administration's failures, and more than anything, I think he and the political strategist Karl Rove were very focused on the president's reputation, on ensuring that he would get reelected.
The lengths that the Bush administration went to kill the investigation into 9/11 are shocking. In the winter of 2002, Dick Cheney called the then Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle of South Dakota and made a threat. The Veep told Daschle the leaders of the war on terror would be too busy to get bogged down in preparing for and testifying in front of the committees. The strong implication of this, if you insist, will say you're interfering with the war effort. The committee moved forward anyway. On June 19, 2002, they discovered that the NSA had intercepted messages from al-Qaeda operatives from the day before the attacks, saying, quote, "The match begins tomorrow," and "Tomorrow is 0 day." It couldn't have been clearer. Someone on the committee leaked those messages to the news media. CNN broadcast them. And in retaliation for this, for telling the truth, the Bush administration sicked the FBI, then run by Robert Mueller, on the committee.
The FBI, really came down hard on the joint inquiry. They polygraphed, they interviewed, they made all kinds of threats. And so, when the FBI comes after you, it's kind of scary because you're looking at not only, potentially losing your position in Congress, but also imprisonment.
It was pure intimidation.
And so it had a very chilling effect, in my opinion, on the progress of the inquiry and their investigation.
Amazing the power that those people have and what they've been able to do. Just listening to this, man, I don't see how this this information and what's been shown here. I just think to myself, man, you can't make this stuff up. It's just the uncovering of what appears to be lies in regards to the 9/11 attacks. 3,000 lives, man. Surely whoever's involved in this and knew about this happening in those hierarchies within the US, you can't tell me that the CIA the world's premier intelligence agency just dropped the ball and happened to miss these two guys and all these people that were planning a terrorist plot or terrorist attack in the US. Just come on, man. Come on.
In the end, Congress did make some interesting discoveries, most of which were redacted in the final report. The Jersey Girls continued to push for the truth. They were furious. They demanded an independent commission. George W. Bush's political enemies agreed. John McCain's revenge was an independent commission that would explore the truth about what happened on 9/11.
This legislation that calls for a blue ribbon commission to examine the facts surrounding September 11th.
On November 27, 2002, President Bush, fearing major political blowback if he vetoed the commission, signed the bill into law. But he managed to neuter the commission in the process. His allies in Congress gave the commission weak subpoena power and limited them to a strict 18-month timeline. They appropriated for the entire investigation just $3 million. By Washington standards, it was nothing. By comparison, Congress gave 13 times more funding to investigate the Monica Lewinsky scandal. It appropriated 11 times more funding for Robert Mueller's investigation into Russiagate. The administration and the Congress simply didn't want the public to know what happened on 9/11.
Just listening to that, it's hard to argue the statements from the first episode, the cover-up. It's hard to, for me anyway, to pull me away from wanting to see the other episodes of this. It's just, will it do anything? Well, I know my reactions won't do anything, but holy heck, this is bloody piss poor on those people that have been a part of this, that proactively work to try to restrict and limit the ability of the independent commission. No conscience.
But that wasn't the only thing they did to subvert the truth.
The White House, one of the ways that they controlled the commission was they were going to choose the chairman.
Their first choice was Henry Kissinger.
Today I'm pleased to announce my choice for commission chairman, Dr. Henry Kissinger.
At the time I was like 30 years old, so I had known Kissinger, but I didn't really, as a stay-at-home suburban housewife, it's not like I, had dived into all of Henry Kissinger's horrible acts and his status as a war criminal.
Dr. Kissinger is one of our nation's most accomplished and respected public servants.
Kissinger had served as National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State under Richard Nixon. He pushed a massive expansion of the Vietnam War, including secret bombings in Cambodia and Laos.
There are questions about his role in Vietnam, his role in the coup in Chile.
When we first met him, he gave us this long talk about how honored it was, and it was like the, not the opportunity, but like a responsibility of a lifetime.
It is a great honor to be appointed by the president to be chairman of the nonpartisan independent commission.
In 2002, he was running a lucrative consulting business called Kissinger Associates.
I really spent a bit of time researching him, predominantly his clients. And we had grave concerns that he was chosen by the vice president and the president and Karl Rove because he was really good at what he does. And so we were also concerned about his clients and that he had a huge conflict of interest. And so we were invited to meet with him at his offices on Park Avenue. We were put into his office. It was kind of close quarters. It was really, really hot. He had the heat turned up to like 100 degrees. And it was the winter, so we had like turtlenecks on and sweaters and stuff. So we're like sitting there like sweating, and he's just sitting there calmly.
Cranking up the thermostat is a well-known manipulation strategy. If you make a room uncomfortably hot, the discomfort puts pressure on the other negotiating party to make concessions more quickly.
So at one point, after we got through the niceties, one of the widows had asked him who his clients were. Do you represent any Saudi royals? Do you represent anyone in the bin Laden family? And, at the time, it wasn't that much of an outrageous question because there were members of the bin Laden family who had relationships with, the Bush family and others. And so it wasn't like it was an outrageous question. And he immediately got flustered and, went to pick up a cup of tea or coffee and spilled it on the table. He feigned that it was his fake eye, which didn't know that he had a fake eye. And we immediately went to like clean it up like moms, like, oh, it's okay. And then he just never answered the question. And then the very next day he resigned.
Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger stepped down from the position Friday.
Scrambling to find a new chairman, Bush's top political advisor, Karl Rove, called former New Jersey Governor Tom Kean and offered him the job. Why was George W. Bush's political bagman making this phone call? No one's ever explained.
Tom is the nicest guy on the planet. He's very much a gentleman. He does not go for the jugular.
After he accepted the job, Kean was dragged to the White House where the president's top advisors told him, "We want you to stand up. You've got to stand up. You've got to have courage. We don't want a runaway commission." In other words, do what we say.
The White House's fingerprints were certainly all over the commission.
Chairman Kean ultimately admitted the commission was, quote, set up to fail. And that's absolutely true. But in addition to a meaningless budget, the tight timeline, and weak subpoena power, there was another problem: the man Kean selected to run it. On January 27, 2003, the commission issued a press release announcing they'd selected an academic called Philip Zelikow to be the commission's executive director.
He was sold to us as a historian. I was responsible for the research for Zelikow to make sure that he didn't have any conflicts of interest. He had a lot of conflicts of interest.
The release describes Zelikow as, quote, a man of high stature who had distinguished himself as an academician, a lawyer, author, and public servant. The release did not note that Zelikow was an active Bush administration official. He served on a White House intelligence advisory panel. It also failed to note his extensive ties to Condoleezza Rice. He'd served on her transition team. He'd co-authored a book with Rice in 1995. In 2002, at Rice's behest, Zelikow authored a policy paper championing preemptive invasions.
Holy heck. If that's not stacking the chips in your favor, man, I don't know what is, with regards to putting a pin in the supposed independent commission. Wow.
And this cemented his role as a key architect of the disastrous invasion of Iraq. Zelikow was the perfect person to keep the commission from finding the truth.
I believe he was placed there to, again, play the gatekeeper, to ensure that the commission would not unearth the truth, and more than anything, to protect the Bush administration and also lay the groundwork for the war in Iraq, in addition to other things.
Zelikow's first move was to pre-write the entire report before the facts were in. In March of 2003, before the investigation had even begun, Zelikow had already prepared a detailed outline complete with chapter headings, subheadings, and sub-subheadings. He kept all of this a secret from the rest of the staff.
As it turned out, his outline is nearly verbatim to what the final book looks like. And so what I believe is that he just basically had the outline, knew that it was a quote-unquote safe outline. It was probably approved by the Bush administration.
His second move was to consolidate his power. Zelikow gave himself total control over the hiring process.
He at first tried to block the staffers from communicating with the commissioners.
In a now public memo, Zelikow cut off his staff's access to the commissioners. Quote, "If you are contacted by a commissioner with questions, please contact Deputy Director Chris Kojum or me." Zelikow restricted access to documents. He divided the staff into separate teams.
He looks like the sort of person, and the more I listen to this, the sort of person that you'd want to get a team together and snatch him and bloody, put him under some pressure to get the truth out of him. It's not funny. Not in that sense, in terms of what he's done, what I'm listening to, in terms of the restrictions and hamstringing the investigation. It's just unreal. Clearly the guy has no care for anybody whatsoever, as I listen to this anyway, from a personal perspective. Jeez.
He siloed them from each other, and he closely supervised Team 3. That was the group that dealt with classified information from the White House and the CIA. One of Zelikow's first moves was a secret agreement with the Justice Department to block access to the files of the congressional inquiry until the White House had had a chance to review them first.
Zelikow was sort of limiting access to documents when people were requesting specific things, Zelikow would block it.
Notably, the final report contains a full 61 references to finding no evidence of certain claims about 9/11.
The cute way of explaining why Zelikow uses that phrase is that if you don't look for the evidence, you don't find the evidence. And so you're not lying when you say we found no evidence.
At one point, a staffer overheard Zelikow pressuring a CIA employee to accept Condoleezza Rice's recollection of intel briefings before the 9/11 attacks. Most damning of all, phone logs kept by Zelikow's assistant show that he was regularly taking calls from both Condoleezza Rice and Karl Rove, George W. Bush's top political advisor in the White House. We reached out to Karl Rove for an explanation of this, and he denied having been in regular contact with Zelikow. But that is untrue. Even Zelikow himself acknowledges he received multiple calls from Karl Rove, but he claims they did not discuss the commission. He doesn't say what they did discuss. None of it is plausible.
It wasn't even like he was on the National Security Council. He didn't.
Correct up that both those guys, Rove and Zelikow, contradict each other with regards to what they passed on or what they shared. Jeez.
Really have any information that would be helpful to the commission. Why is the commission's staff director having communications with the White House's political strategist?
From the outset, the commission started to advance the interests of Bush's neocon foreign policy agenda. When Team 3, the counterterrorism group, submitted their draft to Zelikow, he inserted sentences that tried to link al-Qaeda to Iraq to suggest the terrorist network had repeatedly communicated with the government of Saddam Hussein in the years before 9/11, and that bin Laden had seriously weighed moving to Iraq. In the end, those sentences were removed after staffers alerted the commissioners. But the commissioners did not prevent Zelikow from stacking public hearings with discredited neocons who towed the White House line about Iraq's connections to al-Qaeda, none of which were real. The first outside expert to testify to the commission was the Hoover Institute's Abraham Sofar. His written remarks to the commission include 8 references to Iraq and 5 references to Saddam Hussein. Keep in mind, this was a hearing on 9/11, which had nothing to do with Saddam Hussein or Iraq. Sofar spent most of his time at the public hearing talking about the need for preemptive invasions.
The need for preemptive actions stems ultimately from the conditions of modern life.
At the third hearing, Zelikow produced a florid and widely discredited neocon called Lori Milroy from the American Enterprise Institute. She appeared as a witness.
There is substantial reason to believe that these masterminds are Iraqi intelligence agents.
Bloody hell, she looks questionable.
Substantial reason to believe that these masterminds are Iraqi intelligence agents.
By April of 2004, former Senator Bob Kerrey of Nebraska, a Democrat, confronted Rice about Zelikow's ties to the administration.
But let me just ask you directly, and you can just give me keep it relatively short, but I wanted to get it on the record. Since he was an expert on terrorism, did you ask Philip Zelikow any questions about terrorism during transition, since he was the second person carded in the National Security Office and had considerable expertise?
Philip and I had numerous conversations about the issues that we were facing. Philip was, in fact, as you know, had worked in the campaign and helped with the transition plan. So yes.
Yes, you did talk to him about terrorism?
We talked, Philip and I, over a period of, we worked closely together as academics.
Just during the transition, did you instruct him to do anything on terrorism?
Oh, to do anything on
Yes.
terrorism, to help us think about the structure of the terrorism. The Dick Clark's operations, yes.
Incredibly, the man in charge of the official story of 9/11, Philip Zelikow, was the Bush administration advisor who decided to demote the White House's counterterrorism czar Dick Clark in the months before 9/11. Yet somehow these details, central though they are, were left out of the commission's final report. The 9/11 commission report was a cover-up from beginning to end. That is true. And that's the most important starting point for those seeking to understand what actually happened on September 11th. The official story is a lie. What isn't clear is why our government and subsequent governments under subsequent presidents would want to continue that lie and cover up what actually happened on 9/11. What exactly were they hiding? And more important, who were they protecting? We found out. That's in the next installment of our 9/11 series.
Holy heck. This fella's going hundies on this. All in. So that's the second one down. Yeah, I'll look to try, and if they stick around the same sort of time frame, I'll look to try to do them in one hit rather than breaking them up halfway. That's just over 30 minutes now, but man, I feel pretty deflated, to be honest, listening to these, hearing the information or the evidence and how compelling it is, at least to me. In hindsight, through a different lens, through a different stage in my life as well, does it change my thoughts or opinions about my service and the military? No, it doesn't. I feel grateful, privileged to have served. I would do it again if I could, and if I had the years and the ability to go and to do all of that again, I 100% would. I think the military is a great thing. But yeah, just sad in terms of 3,000 lives lost in whatever hidden secret combination or whatever design was put in place to make that happen in order to, I don't know, I guess satisfy a few people's greed and need for power. I don't know what else you put it down to. But yeah, anyway, I don't have the answers. I've just got more questions and answers. Interesting to hear that they're going to prove it and talk about it in the third installment. So I'll do a reaction on that in due course. But I appreciate your time as always if you made it this far. Thank you very much for your time and for your support. The message is always the same. Any challenges, difficulties, hard times that you may be going through, man, keep turning up. Don't give up. Keep staying in the fight. Put one foot in front of the other. Take one day at a time. Know and trust that things can do and will get better if you want them to. It takes some time. It never happens usually in the time frame that we want things to happen. But if we can all be persistent enough, disciplined enough, consistent enough, and patient enough as we need it, then I know that things can do and will get better. So the sun will shine again. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.